Okay, let's continue our discussion of genetics and get into how Mendel did a great job for us in the scientific community and for us in general to know about genetics and how traits are inherited. But Mendel was working with a very simple pea plant. And it turns out, of course, that for larger organisms and many other plants, most other plants, inheritance is actually a lot more complicated than Mendel's discoveries. It's not to say it's impossible to understand, it's just more complicated. And so I'm going to present half of the next PowerPoint to you in this, talking just through new terms for you on all the different ways that genetics does end up being more complicated, and it affects all living organisms. So let's go to the PowerPoint. The PowerPoint is beyond Mendel. Ooh, ah. And I'm going to enlarge this, and then I'm going to duplicate. There we go. So there we go. Beyond Mendel's laws of inheritance. Now this picture, this slide, with all these many different pictures actually show you a lot of the differences that can occur in inheritance patterns. These are albino brothers. It's a band from, I don't know, Norway, Sweden, Finland, one of them, Denmark, I'm not sure. And so inheritance-wise, they inherited the gene for albinism. This is Andre the Giant on both of these bottom corners here. Andre the Giant is no longer with us. He suffered from acromegaly. He made a lifestyle of it. He was a professional wrestler, and you might have seen the movie The Princess Bride, in which he is featured as well. But acromegaly is the condition of having too large of a body, essentially. And so typically the people who have acromegaly do die at a relatively young age because their heart can't keep up with that body size. You see the same thing in very large dogs, such as Great Danes and Irish Wolfhounds, which I have personal experience with both. They do not live very long lives because their hearts just can't keep up the energy and the pumping for how big those dogs are for very long. And then here you have an Arctic fox in the winter. But here you have an Arctic fox in the quote unquote summer of the Arctic. And this display of fur and how it changes with the seasons is also a complicated inheritance pattern. So, right, no. We love Mendel. Thank you so much, Gregor Mendel. Rest in peace. But you worked with a very simple system. Peas are genetically simple. Most traits are controlled by a single gene, which what's made them so wonderful for Mendel. But it makes them just more simple than most of the things on this life, on this planet. Each gene has only 2 alleles, one of which would be dominant versus the other one. And that was wonderful. It showed us genotype versus phenotype. He found those 7 different P traits, and he did a lot of research. But to prove that life is in fact more complicated than pea plants, we have to talk about all the different ways genes are controlled. And one of those ways is incomplete dominance, where the heterozygote shows an intermediate blended phenotype. For example, our homozygous dominant carnation is red, solid red, beautiful red. Our homozygous recessive carnation is white. Okay, so far so good. When you get a heterozygous between a red and a white flower, though, you don't get red, which would be complete dominance. Here you actually get pink. And it shows that both the dominant and the recessive are being displayed. And so you get about 50% less color. This is an incomplete dominance. And to show you farther, so your F1 generation, your filial 1 generation would all be pink because it's true and true. And so you're going to get big R, little r for all of them. And if you let those self-pollinate, instead of getting 3 to 1, like we would have gotten with complete dominance, like we did with Mendal, you instead get a 1 to 2 to 1. So 1/4 of the offspring will be red. 1/4 will be, or 2/4 will be pink, 50%, and then the other 25% will be white. I don't know what my mouth is doing, sorry. And so this is just called incomplete dominance. It's another way that traits are inherited. We also have co-dominance, and this goes with blood types. This is the most famous example of co-dominance. And the specific example is AB blood type. You can be type A, you can be type B, you can be type AB, and you can be type O in terms of blood. There's 4 blood types that you can be if you don't take in any other factors. It doesn't blend the phenotypes. You don't get a partial A and a partial B if you're AB. You are A and B, and you're expressing both of those fully. So that is co-dominance, when you are expressing both genes fully. Incomplete dominance is when both genes are being expressed partially. Co-dominance is when both are being expressed fully. So in type A, you have only the A expression happening. In type B, you have only the B expression happening. And in this italicized little I is to represent type O blood. You don't have anything being expressed. Type O does not have proteins on its surface. I mean, it has some proteins, so it doesn't have these proteins on its surface. But then you get type A and B, and those alleles are co-dominant. So both antigens are being produced fully. And they just want you to know that type O is recessive to both. So when we talk about blood, very briefly, when we talk about blood, you can be type A. That can come in 2 different ways. Both your parents were type A, or one was type A and one was O. Either way, you're going to be type A. You express type A on your surface of your blood, but you have anti-B antibodies because you are not B. So B would be foreign for you. Switch it around. If you were type B, you're either double Bs from your parents or B and then O from your parents. You are displaying type B antigens on your surface, but you are anti-A because A would be foreign to you. If you are AB, you are expressing both antigens fully on your surface. You are not producing any antibodies to any blood type. This makes you the universal recipient, which means all blood can be pumped into your body with no issues because you're not making antibodies to any of it. If you are type O, you are not producing any antigens, which means you are making all the antibodies. But not having antigens means that all these other blood types that are making antibodies would have nothing to attack on the surface of your blood. And so you are the universal donor. So your blood can go into all other people's. And that's blood in a nutshell, but co-dominance is seen in blood type A, B. Then we have to talk about pleiotropy. So most genes are pleiotropic. What does pleiotropy mean? It means that one gene affects more than one phenotypic character. And so we are looking at instances of both dwarfism and acromegaly here. And so, I'm sorry, what that means, if one gene affects more than one phenotypic character, it means one gene affects more than one trait. So in dwarfism, you aren't just short. There's actually quite a few other things that are happening to you internally. And that's all from one gene. Same thing with acromegaly. Look how large these hands are. Acromegaly is not you are just large. There are other things happening in your body. So dwarfism is achondroplasia. That's the medical definition term. And gigantism is acromegaly. So we already mentioned Andre the Giant. He's probably the most famous example of gigantism, but anybody in the Guinness Book of World Records who was ever called the world's tallest man or woman is somebody that's suffering from acromegaly. And they are typically, like 7-something feet tall, which is just too large for our human needs. It's too large. It takes too much energy for our body to be that big. It takes too long for our waste to be dispelled. So like I said, they typically die really like in their 30s, 40s, not like super early, but early enough in life. Andre the Giant became a wrestler, and that's how he used his genetic mutation for his own betterment. And then dwarfism, on the other hand, is kind of the opposite. It's not the opposite completely, like there's different things happening internally, but you know, everything's small. Also typically they also typically die young. That's true too. Okay, so you can have two inheritance patterns with achondroplasia. It is dominant. If you have the dominant gene, you will express dwarfism. So if you have one parent who is heterozygous, which means they would be also suffering from dwarfism, and one parent who is homozygous recessive, which would be normal-sized human, then what you would get out of that in terms of offspring is you'd have a 50% chance of producing a child that is also suffering from achondroplasia, and then 50% chance of having a normal-sized average human child. If you had both parents suffering from achondroplasia, which I say suffering, I don't mean suffering. They actually typically live really fine lives. I just mean having the genetic mutation. Then this is the inheritance pattern there, where if the dominant gene was given to an offspring on both sides of the parent, if mom and dad gave the dominant gene, that offspring is not viable. That offspring will die most likely in utero. It'll be a miscarriage type situation. Then you have 50% achondroplastic child and 25% normal. Okay, so we have done incomplete dominance, where both genes are expressed kind of equally, but partially. So less, both genes are expressed less, but they're both being expressed. That's incomplete dominance. You have co-dominance, where both genes are being expressed fully. You have pleiotropy, where one gene affects more than one trait. So one gene affects more than one protein display. And now we have epistasis as fourth term. This is where one gene completely masks another gene. We see this in fur color. That's the best example we can give you is fur color. And here we got some mice, okay? So you have two black mice here. I'm just gonna put all the words up. Okay, we have two black mice here. Now remember when we talked about inheriting two traits from two different areas of a gene or chromosome, it's a dihybrid cross. So you're gonna have 16 here. We have the 16 squares here. And you were expecting to see a 9331, right? But not here because it's not fully homozygous dominant and homozygous recessive. But if you have a big B and a big C, you are expressing black pigment, okay? So C means pigment, whether color is there at all. And then B will be black. So C means pigment, whether the color is there at all. So it's the C gene that is actually going to control what color the mice end up being. So if you inherit a big B and a big C, you're going to be black. You're showing pigment and you're showing black pigment. If you inherit a little b, but still a big C, in Mendal's world, little b would have been white, but we're still producing pigment with the big C here. So here, little b with pigment is going to be brown. Then it doesn't matter if it's big B's or little b's or a big B and a little b, it does not matter what color gene you get. If you cannot express pigment and you have a little C here, you're going to be white no matter what. So this is epistasis. This third option, they're getting a color gene. It could be big B, it could be little b or heterozygous, but it doesn't matter because they cannot express the color. So that one expression gene completely masks the fact that there's a color gene there. Don't think about it too hard. Don't worry about chi-square tests. That's beyond what we talk about. We can see it in labs too. You know, you have black, brown, or yellow labs. You actually have two types of yellow labs if you never knew that. So this is still the same thing. It's the same concept. You have a color gene, and then you have the inability or ability to show color at all. So pigment is big E. I don't know why they used E, but if you have the big E gene, you're going to show color. No pigment is little e. And the pigments can either be brown or black, but no pigment is your yellow labs. No pigment is your yellow labs. Now, however, you can have no pigment that's supposed to be brown, and your mucous membranes, the nose and the lips and the eye rims, are actually going to show the brown because it's not fur color, it's a different gene that's doing the mucous membranes. But the fur is going to be yellow because it can't produce that black or brown pigment. The same thing for a yellow lab. You can have yellow fur, but a black nose, eyes, and lips. So you have yellow brown and yellow black labs, and then you have brown, which are little b's, and black, which are big B labs. So it's just the ability to express whether you have color and then expressing the color itself. But the ability to express the color is epistasis. If you can't do it, you don't get the color. Oh, no. But then think of skin color. Skin color has an extreme range. You have super, super pales, not albinos. Those are something different. You have super, super, super pale, kind of like me, which can have red or yellow undertones, to super, 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 super dark, gorgeous, black, deep. I don't even know. There's one supermodel on this planet. I think she's been noted in either Guinness or something as the darkest skin tone on the planet. It's stunning. The array of colors you can get in the skin, all because of melanin production, all because of where you grew up in relation to the sun, right? Well, historically, like I didn't grow up in Northern Europe, but because my ancestors did, I'm this pale. Some phenotypes are determined by the additive effects of two or more genes on a single character. So what this is trying to say is that there are many genes that code for skin pigment. I don't know if you know this, but your skin is actually chimeric, which means there are typically patches of what was your mother's skin next to what was your dad's skin, mother's dad, mother's dad. It evens out for each individual unless you have something like vitiligo or whatever it's called. I'm sorry, I don't know. But many actual genes, many genes are making whatever skin tone you are right now. And instead of being like, this is the super light portion of you, and here's the super dark portion of you, and here's the middle tan portion of you, it actually just all blends together to create your skin tone. Good Lord in heaven. This happens for all phenotypes, this happens for many phenotypes of human expression, including our skin color, our height, our weight, our intelligence, and our behaviors. It's a blending of your ancestors on how tall you are, how heavy you are or skinny, your intelligence level, if you are shy, introverted, polite, loud, crass type of thing, and also your skin color. Albinism, however, is a single gene. And if you inherit that recessive gene, it will mask all the other genes that could blend your skin color into a tone. You're just going to be albino. Albinism is the effect of not being able to produce. What did I just do? Stop doing that. I didn't even know there was a button there. Oh, that's how you do that. Interesting. Anyway, albinism is the inability to produce melanin. There is no color being produced because of an enzyme malfunction that occurs from taking tyrosine, the amino acid, and producing color from that. Johnny and Edgar Winter brothers, why couldn't I remember that earlier, are not a famous example because I'm sure you don't know them. I didn't know them until Miss Segovia showed me this PowerPoint. And then also albinism in Africans, it's most notable, but there's albinism in other cultures as well. I mean, albino people are across the nation, or not even the nation, the world. Anybody can have albinism. That's where I wanted to stop this presentation. I wanted to stop there so you can get a handle on all those new terms, because then the next part of this presentation, we have to talk about sex-linked traits, where you either inherit something from your mother on the X chromosome or your father on the Y chromosome. If it's X chromosome inherited, typically the disorders mostly show up in the males of that family because the females have another X chromosome to cover for them. Excuse me. Hold on one second, sorry. Anyway, so we'll talk about sex linked in the next portion of these recorded lectures. So it's really just terminology, this lecture. You have incomplete dominance, codominance, pleiotropy, and epistasis. That's all we've really talked about. Polygenic inheritance was in there, but it's going along with epistasis. So if you can learn those 4 terms for this PowerPoint, you're going to be very good. All right, thank you so much. See y'all next recorded lecture.